Well, I want to tell you how this is going to go tonight, because I have attended so many events where I thought, wow, they shared some really good information and there are probably some key takeaways that I could do. And then I went home and I went back to my life and they kind of, left my brain. So here's what we're going to do today. I am going to share with you the 7 skills of successful change agents. And for each one of these skills, I'm going to share with you what the skill is and what the pitfall is if the change agents that you need to have those skills don't have them, so you understand why those skills are important. I'm also going to share an example to kind of make it real for you, hopefully make it real for you. And then there's a reason why you have a handout. The reason you have the handout is after each one of the 7 skills, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to either think by yourselves or talk at your table. I want you to have a little bit of time to think about how you're going to develop that skill. Because so many of you are currently leading changes or have been tasked with leading a big transformation in your organization. And so I want this to be something that is meaningful and that you can apply immediately after this, after you leave here. So that means that I have a request. When I say, after I've given you some time to chat, when I say welcome back, I'm going to ask that you please come back, because I can see that it's so much fun networking and there's so much expertise in this room that you may be excited to keep going. But if you keep doing that, we're not going to get through all 7. Okay? And I'd really like to get through all 7 if possible. So here we go. Now, I think it's important when I'm talking about change to give you a few definitions, because I want to make sure we are all on the same page. So here's what I mean by change. You have people who do things today. They know what to do. They know where they're expected to show up every day. They have certain policies and procedures, standard operating procedures. They know how to be successful at their jobs. When we're talking about change, we're saying that we want these people to move into a new place. We want them to start behaving differently. We want them to start doing their jobs differently, maybe interacting with our customers differently. What we're asking them to do is to step out of the known and their comfort zone and into something that frankly might be a bit scary, especially if it's something they've been doing for many, many years. And so that's why it's so important when we are embarking on a change effort. It is so important that we have people who are change agents. These change agents are the coaches, they're the cheerleaders, they're the ones who can explain the value to these people that we're asking to do something differently, and who can actually encourage and convince them to step out of their comfort zone and to do something new and to stay there. Because often when we're embarking on a change, the way that we're going to get the benefit out of that change, right, if we're putting a lot of dollars and resources and people and everything toward it, we expect to get a return on our investment. That's only going to happen if the people dip their toe into the change and then decide, you know what, it's not so bad, I'll stay here. So we need change agents. Now, I want to tell you a story about how we get people to embark on change. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy was touring NASA, and he encountered a janitor who was sweeping the floors. And he asked that janitor, he said, "Hi, I'm Jack Kennedy. What are you doing?" And the janitor said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon, Mr. President. I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Now, some people would see that janitor and think, oh, he's just sweeping the floors, he just dumps out our garbage cans. But what the engineers and the project managers at NASA had done so beautifully was they had explained to everyone in the organization how and why their contributions mattered. They had made this janitor, in fact, everyone in the building, understand how the actions that they were taking and the jobs that they were doing, how it contributed to the overall mission of the organization. And that's really how we get people out of their current state of comfort and into stepping their toe into the unknown, is when we've taken the time to make them feel that they are valued, that we have given them the time and we have learned to appreciate their individual contributions, and we've made sure that they feel that we understand that what we're asking them to do differently, we understand that it impacts them. We understand that maybe it's uncomfortable, and we have thought about and are considering what that impact is so that they feel like they're going to be successful when they take the step into that change. So who is a change agent? Sometimes on change projects, we have the sponsor and we have the project manager, and we maybe have some analysts and communications people, and we may have a few people named as change agents. I personally would argue that everyone on your change team needs the ability to act as the change agent. That everyone who is embarking on this change with you, whatever role they have, they need to understand how to coach and guide the people in your organization into making that change. They need to have the appreciation for what it's going to take in order for these people to be successful. And so I would argue that all of you in this room, based on things I've heard you're working on, all of you need these 7 skills of successful change agents in order to achieve the things that you are embarking on in your organizations. So let's get into them. Number 1, change agents need to be able to envision what is possible. Successful change agents, especially when we're embarking on something new, what I've seen in my years of consulting and even being an employee is that sometimes organizations will say that they want to embark on change, but they limit us. We start out by constraining our ideas to, well, we can't touch that. We can't touch that process. We can't impact that area. If we limit ourselves up front, we're not opening ourselves up to the possibility of being able to truly brainstorm. Because the fact of the matter is, so many organizations have failed and failed again at change. It hasn't changed in 15 years. 70% of change efforts still fail. It happens over and over again. And I would argue that one of the reasons they change is because we start out by constraining ourselves. We start out by not being willing to envision what is possible. So if we lack that skill, we're limiting our solution to today's constraints. And often if we're limiting that solution, what it means is we truly haven't set ourselves up for success. And we haven't set our people up for success either. If we say, well, we want you to change, but you can still build your product that way. We want you to change, but you can still answer customer calls that way. If we do that, we're likely not going to reap the true benefits of why we're embarking on this change to begin with. That is why it is so important to envision what is possible. I think the best example of this is Apple. I never envisioned in 1997 when they came out with Think Different, I never envisioned this watch that I can call my friends from, actually, and call 911 when I break my ankle. I never envisioned that it would track my exercise. Or how about this phone that actually holds all of my music and gave me turn-by-turn directions how to get here today. Apple, I think, is a fantastic example of being able to envision what is different. So for those of you who may not remember or maybe aren't familiar with it, I just want to read the text of their ad. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius, because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who actually do. So with that, I am going to give you a few minutes, and I want you to think about how you are going to go back to your organizations or the changes that you are trying to embark on. How are you going to embrace this idea of thinking different? And again, if some of you are more comfortable just thinking by yourselves, that's fine. If some of you want to talk amongst your tables, feel free. I'm just going to give you a few minutes. And again, when I say welcome back, I'm just going to ask that you please rejoin me. Hopefully you all now have at least some idea of some strategies you might take on number 1. So let's move on to change agent skill number 2. Ask powerful questions. Now, there are perfectly legitimate questions that we ask every single day. Did you get my email? Is the meeting on your calendar? There are all kinds of questions we ask, especially when we're acting as project managers or change managers. These are normally called polar questions, and it doesn't mean that they're bad. They're perfectly good questions. The reason they're considered polar is because they really invite a yes or no response. So these polar questions don't really yield any insight. They're just something that, yep, you got the email, you're going to be at the meeting, it's good. So I want to differentiate that from powerful questions. Powerful questions are open-ended. Powerful questions invite reflection, and these are not questions to which somebody is going to answer simply yes or no. A great example of a powerful question is, tell me about the person who has been most successful at effecting change in your organization, and then listen. Tell me about the last project that you worked on that made you excited to come to work every day, and then listen. By asking powerful questions, you can truly start to understand the people around you and the people that you're impacting. And you can also glean insights into things you wouldn't if you just started out using your standard project plan and your standard issues log and embarking on the project. Again, I've been a project manager for years. I use the standard templates, yet I also think it's important to pause for a moment and say, hey, who here has actually done this before? And how can I learn from that person? The reason that it's important to ask powerful questions is by asking powerful questions, we can make sure that what we're embarking on is not just the tip of the iceberg. Sometimes when we are told to embark on a change, really what people are talking about are the symptoms. It's not the deeper issue. It's not the true root cause. I think my example will help to understand this. So I've been a consultant for many years. Have any of you been consultants or are consultants? Okay, so please tell me if you have the same experience. You get a statement of work, you're told, hey, come in to this client and do a certain amount of work. And you get there and you find out that the real business problem has absolutely nothing to do with what was written on the contract. I'm seeing heads nod. Yeah, this is what I've found too. I was tasked one time with, can you come in and can you just fix our documentation? Oh my God, our documentation. Just come in and fix it. And by the way, our people, they're all poor performers, so if you need to clean house, clean house. Wait, huh? What? Okay, so by asking powerful questions, I was able to uncover that, you know what? I really do believe in W. Edwards Deming. He was the father of systems thinking. I'm an engineer. And he believed that like 99% of people want to do a good job. I completely agree with that. I think people are doing their best. I think they're coming in and they're doing their best and they're taking their templates and they're saying, okay, I'm asked to fill this out, and they're doing it. But often the real root cause of why the documentation is poor and these people are considered poor performers, it has far more to do with things like, were they ever trained? Were there clear roles and responsibilities? Did they understand that the people who were going to receive these documents expected other things in the documents than they were ever told were supposed to go in the document, and maybe there wasn't even a section in there to put it there? And so it's not that the people are poor performers, and it's not that the documentation is awful. Our real problem is that we don't have the appropriate training or the appropriate roles and responsibilities. Or I'll even say it, maybe it's a culture of fear. Maybe people don't feel comfortable raising their hand and saying, you know what? You asked me to fill this out and I don't know what a good example looks like. Could you please show me a good example? Sometimes there are business cultures that don't encourage people to raise their hands, where it's not okay to take a risk. And so people come in and they do their very best job. But by asking powerful questions and by getting to the heart of the matter, what we can do is make sure that we're truly addressing the root cause and not the symptom. This is our second time where I'm going to give you a turn. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Think about where in your organizations or maybe where on your projects it makes sense to start asking some powerful questions. What might you ask? Who might you approach? To truly make sure that you're addressing the root cause and not just the symptom that you've been tasked with leading. I'll give you a couple minutes. I'm so excited by the energy in this room. I have to tell you, it is such a pleasure to be presenting to an audience that's engaged and talking to each other. It makes it a lot easier to be up here. Let's go on to change agent skill number 3. Listen actively. So listening actively, it builds on what we were just talking about. When we ask powerful questions, when we listen actively, we are demonstrating to the person that we're interacting with, we're demonstrating that we are genuinely seeking to understand. We really want to understand what the impact of the change is to them. We really want to understand what their role is in the organization. Because especially if we're consultants, we may be going to various different clients. It may be a brand new industry for us. It's very important that when we're interacting with the people that we've been tasked to, lead a change for, that we demonstrate that we are truly listening to what they have to say. I will tell you, I know it's hard right now because we all love our phones and I love my watch, but we do need to put them down and put our eyes and make eye contact with the person that we're talking to. That demonstrates active listening. The first step is to restate what we heard. I tend to start with, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard is you said that 3 other project teams have tried the same effort and you're exhausted and you have no interest in doing this because you're just burned out. Did I hear that correctly? Are you laughing because you've heard that response? Right. Restating what you heard demonstrates to the person that you're listening to, it demonstrates that you were engaged and that you are seeking to understand. Clarify if there's something you don't understand. Especially when I go into a new client that's a new industry for me, they may be using terms that I have no idea. Can you please help me understand what these letters mean? Because to me, I may think they mean one thing, but to you, they may mean something else. So clarifying also demonstrates that you are truly interested in understanding the impact and understanding the people that you're talking to. And finally, show empathy. The fact is, sometimes when we're embarking on a change, all changes take time. And sometimes people will reach the point where they just need to vent. And so successful change agents are able to be that sounding board and to understand that these people have 3 other priorities and these key customer commitments coming up. And yet they're still taking 20 minutes of their time today to answer my question so I can make sure that my project plan is okay. So it's important to show empathy and that you're truly appreciating the fact that what you're doing is impacting a human being. The reason this is so important is because if we don't listen actively, people won't trust us. If we don't listen actively, people won't believe that we're truly seeking to understand. People may think that, that change team, they're just using the same old project plan, they're embarking on that same old change, it's not gonna work, the last 3 didn't work, I don't trust them, I'm not doing it. By taking the time to acknowledge that there is a human being in front of you who is being impacted by this change and who you're asking to get out of their comfort zone and do something differently, you are able to start to build that trust and to demonstrate that you truly want to design a change that's going to stick. The reason that I bring up listen actively is because the culture of your organization also plays a dramatic impact on the success of change. Now, I love this example, and I just have to highlight the fact that Liz Ryan, who wrote The Human Workforce, she's amazing, and she actually called this Command and Control is for Dinosaurs. I just love that title. But I want to acknowledge the fact that command and control environments exist, and those cultures are extremely difficult to get change done in. So when I'm talking about command and control, I'm talking about kind of the classic style of leadership that was really popular in like the 1970s and before. It's my way or the highway. Do it because I said so. When I say jump, I expect you to say how high, right? That's command and control. And often in command and control cultures, those big decisions about what the change is going to look like and who I'm going to let you put on your team and who I'm going to let be a part of it, those are actually made behind closed doors by a small group of people who maybe don't understand just how big the impact of this change is. What I love is that in the last few years, we are moving more toward a collaborative style of management. For those of you who study how changing demographics are affecting our companies, especially when we're thinking of millennials, right? Millennials, they don't want to just wait. They want to be able to knock on the door, go in, talk to anybody at any level of the organization. And what I love about their energy is that they're forcing us to rethink how we engage with our employees, how we make ourselves accessible, especially when we're leading change. So listening actively is one great way if your culture is historically command and control. Listening actively is one great way to start to demonstrate and to start to show the behavior of being more collaborative. Listening actively demonstrates that you're seeking other people's input. It demonstrates that you're not limiting the change to just those few executives who are in the room. You're inviting others to be a part of it, and you genuinely want to hear what they're saying. And you're restating it to them to make sure that you didn't get it wrong. So listening actively is one great way. If your culture is one of the things holding you back in your change, listening actively is one of those great things that all of the change agents on your team can start doing to start demonstrating the value of behaving differently, of being more collaborative and more inclusive and genuinely seeking to understand. So now it's your turn. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about what strategies are you going to take? Who might you approach? What might you say or do in order to demonstrate that you are listening actively? All right, now that we have strategies for change agent skill number 3, let's go on to number 4. Welcoming others' ideas. I am a huge fan of improv, and I love this idea of yes and. Somebody throws out an idea and we say yes and we add to it, and we try not to shut down the ideas. We truly want to welcome others. Now, the reason why when we're leading change, it is so important to welcome others' ideas is because if we're showing someone our project plan and saying, here's the change that we're embarking on, here's what we're doing, and they come back and say, you know what, that's great, but if you add these 3 things, I'm on board, it's important to take a breath and to think about it. Because if you say yes, and if you're able to incorporate their 3 things into your plan, you've just created another change agent. And the reason that that's so powerful is because people follow other people. I've always said nobody follows me. My title is business analyst or project manager or program manager. People aren't following me because of my title. They're following those people who have already dipped their toe in. The early adopters or the pilot people, the people who've already been willing to try out our change and who aren't worse off than before they started. That's how you generate buzz. So the more you can get people's ideas into what you're doing, the more you can show that you are welcoming them, the more change agents you've created, the more buzz you've created in the organization, and the more likely it is that it's positive buzz, right? Because people are going, oh, I know the last 3 failed, but they actually listened to me. They actually heard that my team can't be touched in September, and they adjusted their project plan around me. I'm in. Now, I will tell you, if we had, 7 people on a change team, I'm sure we would have at least 10 or more ideas for how we could do it better or how we could do it differently. So I fully recognize that we can't welcome everybody's ideas. We can't just throw out the project plan and do it dramatically differently. We can't do that. But it's important to at least pause and take a breath and see if we can incorporate it. Now, if we need to say no, and there could be very good reasons why we say no. If we have to say no, it's important that we do it in a way that explains why. That we didn't just fold our arms and say, nope, nice try. That instead we demonstrate, here's why. So, for example, if I'm launching a new project management approach and we're going agile, and a team comes back and says, oh, but if we just tweak our waterfall process, it'll be fine. Sorry, we can't do that. And here's why. Here's why we're going to Agile. Here's why it's important. And if you've taken the time to listen to them, to allow them to suggest their ideas, even if you've said no, sometimes you create new change agents anyway. And the reason you've created new change agents anyway is because you took the time to have them feel heard. Welcoming others' ideas is a very powerful skill for successful change agents. The problem is, if we don't welcome others' ideas, if we just cross our arms and say the plan is the plan and, like it or leave it, we alienate people. If people don't feel like we truly understand the impact to them and like they can't possibly make us understand that, wow, that training approach, we tried it before, but my team needs an in-person approach. They just can't do a computer-based learning. If we just ignore them and just say, they're just being a squeaky wheel, they're just resisting and they just don't wanna try, we alienate them. And the problem with that is that buzz is going to get generated. But now it's the negative buzz of, yet another failed change project on the way, right? Yeah, they don't listen to me either. They don't understand how I do what I do. So, I'm not getting on board, you shouldn't either. It's really important to demonstrate that you do respect and appreciate the people that you're impacting. And again, sometimes you're gonna have to say no, just do it in a way that they feel like they were at least heard. I want to give you an example. This goes back to a business requirements document process I had to launch. So the company had done all this research and decided, okay, we're going to go, our requirements are not working, we're delivering the wrong things, they're not meeting our business needs, whatever. We need this new process. And so we hired an outside team of experts to train us in how to do it. So I had a team that was super excited and said, you know what? We want to be first. We want to be the early adopters. We will test out your templates. We will get you some good examples with a real live project from our actual organization showing that this is going to work here. We're on board. There's just one thing. In the previous business requirements document that they'd been using for 20 years, they had this particular section. And this section was called an assumption section. Right? So here are the assumptions we have. We assume that training will be deployed within 2 weeks of when we launch. We assume that we will have staff augmentation, so we have enough operators in order to answer these calls. We have all kinds of assumptions that are going into this particular project, right? We have all these things. Well, the experts were saying, those are actually requirements. Don't put anything in an assumption section. Those are actually requirements. If we don't staff appropriately, we're not going to be successful. If we don't train appropriately, we're not going to be successful. That should go in the requirement section, because if it doesn't go in the requirement section, nobody looks at assumptions and we're going to miss something and the project's going to fail. So here's my compromise, because I was in charge. I left the bleeping assumptions section in, but here's what we did. When we trained and we had experts assigned to help our early adopters actually do this new process. So when the experts were coaching and mentoring, they made sure that anytime anybody tried to write something in the assumptions section, they paused and said, wait, is that something we actually need a solution for? And they'd say, oh, you're right, that's a requirement, and they'd move it. And so what happened was, because I didn't die on the sword for one little section of a document, we got fantastic results. And we proved that this process actually worked within this organization. And we had these early adopters who now had become change agents because they were so excited that they were working on the projects that people cared about and that their requirements were better and that they were going to have less defects and less things that they had to clean up on the back end. And they became our biggest PR firm, if you will, for this change because they didn't die on the sword over one little section. That's why it's important to welcome others' ideas. And I always refer to it as the negotiables and the non-negotiables, right? There are always going to be some things that are not negotiable, that people absolutely have to do. Assumption section, that was totally negotiable. And as a matter of fact, a year later, when we had deployed this business requirements process more broadly throughout the enterprise, by that time the assumption section was gone because we realized we didn't need it. So now it's your turn. What are you going to do or say that will demonstrate that you are willing to welcome others' ideas? I'll give you a few minutes. I'm so excited to see all this interaction and sharing of ideas. So I hope you're enjoying it too. Let's move on to number 5. Develop trust. Successful change agents are able to develop trust throughout their organization, and I would argue throughout their network. So this is probably a great place to do that too, right? Find those people who have the expertise. Find out what they've done. What have they done that has been successful? Now you'll see that some of these skills are building on each other, right? Some of the ways that we develop trust is we listen actively. We are open to new ideas. We also show humility. Often when I go into a new client, again, especially if it's a new industry for me, the fact is I am not the expert. I don't understand how the products are made. I don't really understand the customers. I can help from a change perspective and from what I know of how we identify the right people and get them all marching in the right direction. But I need to show humility to demonstrate that these people who've been doing this job and doing it for a long time, they are truly the experts. And so in order for me to truly understand what's going on and what we need to do to make this change successful, I need to have people who trust me enough that they will come to me and say, you know what, you're going down the wrong path. The way you're doing it is the same way that all 3 of the previous efforts failed. You need to do something else. People are not going to trust me if I come in there and I'm arrogant and I'm like, I'm the change agent and I know what's going on and thou shalt do. It's not going to work. It's important that we build these relationships. And the biggest reason why this is important, I hate to say it, but it's been true on just about every effort I have led. Often the people assigned to your change effort are the ones who can be spared from their part of the organization because they're not critical to how the products and services are actually built. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, okay. So here's the challenge with the people who can be spared. They're really sweet. They have great intentions. Again, I genuinely believe everybody really does want to do a good job. The problem is the best they can do is bring you the process flow from 3 years ago that was obsolete the minute it was written and nobody's actually looked at, right? This is why it's important to develop trusted relationships. Find those people, and I will tell you, every single organization I've ever gone to, there are the 3 to 5 rock stars that everybody wants on all of their projects. Make friends with them. Take time. Seriously, coffee. Everybody eats lunch, right? Everybody eats lunch, even virtual coffee. I have virtual happy hours sometimes with people, not on working hours, but find a way that you can develop a relationship. Because by developing a trusted relationship with those people who actually know how the process works and actually know what's going on, they can tell you where you're going off track. They can tell you to totally ignore that process flow and talk to this other person in their group who maybe doesn't have enough time to be on the project team, but could at least look at our design and say, you know what, they can identify the gaps for you. By building these healthy, trusted relationships, that's how you can truly find out from those people who also trust you if you're going to be successful or not. I'll give you an example. I was tasked with deploying a new banking software. I had never worked in banking before, and it was a job as a consultant, and I went in, and I learned that banks tend to not have their own software developers. It turns out most banks use one of 2 or 3 different software vendors to actually do all of their checking accounts and their savings accounts and money markets and whatever it is that they do. They have software. Well, this particular bank had already terminated their contract with their existing vendor, and that vendor was not happy and was not going to give them an extension. And here's your drop dead date, and by God, you better figure out your plan and you better have moved over to your new vendor because we ain't helping you. And I thought, wow, I don't know anything about banking. I mean, I have a checking account and I have a mortgage, but I've never done this before. And so I asked, who's the one person in the bank that everybody goes to? And I kept hearing the name Angelique. Angelique. She was the director of operations. And so, of course, being the director of operations, she could not be assigned to my project, right? So I went and made friends with her. And I said, listen, I'm new to banking. And I understand you were here the last time this happened. And I heard it was really painful. And so I just want to ask, what was the most painful part of that project? And the good news was, because I had built a trusted relationship with her, and because she understood that I wasn't asking this question to say, ugh, why'd you hire that project manager? They were awful. I was genuinely seeking to understand because I knew we had this deadline and I didn't know much about banking, and I wanted to make sure that this project went better and wasn't painful for anybody. And I found out that what happened last time, the biggest problem was data conversion. It turns out data is not always clean. Again, so exactly, I think we all kind of know that. Data is not clean. And the last time they did a software vendor change, they had time for one data conversion, and then they spent 3 to 4 months cleaning the data because stuff was in the wrong field or it wasn't formatted correctly or, blah, blah, blah. So by talking to Angelique, and by genuinely building this relationship with her, we planned and performed 3 rounds of data conversion. And the awesome thing about it was we could also manage expectations really well. Our first round, we expect garbage. Yay, garbage. We want to find it because we want to clean it. So our first round, we don't expect it to go smoothly, but let's make sure that we figure out what the garbage is. The second round is where we can find out if some of our mapping is wrong. Oh, this checking account type was supposed to be mapped to that checking account type, and it isn't. So the second round, we expect to go a little bit better. We still expect to find things. Third one, we expect to be clean. The awesome part about doing this, we went live on the date. We migrated hundreds of millions of dollars, and everything balanced to the penny. And I will tell you that I would never have built a project plan like that if I hadn't talked to Angelique. Because it never would have dawned on me the importance of 3 rounds of data conversion. Because that's not just been my experience before. So now it's your turn. What are you going to do? How are you going to build trusted relationships with those people who can truly tell you how to be successful and those things that have gone wrong before, so you don't just encounter the same pitfalls over and over again.
And you worked at Target for a while?
2 more to go. All right, number 6. You ready? I'm positive everybody in this room could guess this one. The ability to influence without authority. Again, our titles are not necessarily going to convince anybody that they should believe us, trust us, follow us. It's extremely important that we are able to influence outside of our direct sphere of influence. How can we impact people in other departments or throughout the organization and encourage them that change is truly a good idea? And oh, by the way, this means you. I'm not just saying I'm going to change. Sure, I'm on board, but this means all of us. The way that we influence without authority, a key part of it is being able to explain the business problem. And what I mean by that, and I heard some of this earlier tonight, it's being able to explain the business problem in a way that that person cares about. If it's so far abstracted from where they are, they still might not care. So it's important to adapt based on your audience and be able to explain why this change is happening, why it's so important to the organization, and why, yes, we mean we need to do it now. Be authentic. I love the fact that authentic leadership has been such a topic over the last few years, because I've always thought, well, isn't that how we build trusted relationships and get stuff done, is by honestly approaching people and saying, yo, here's what's going on. Be authentic. And the reason I include share stories is like that early adopting team I mentioned before, the one who, leave the assumptions document, the assumptions section in, let's just get them on board. Because it's far more powerful and it has a greater impact on people when you are sharing stories of people who have similar roles to them in the organization, and they understand that, oh, that person is okay too. They used to do things maybe the way I do them, and now that they're doing something new, it's fantastic if you can share successes and unexpected, delightful things. I often just hope for not worse off. because change is different and change is hard. And I don't know how many times I have joined a gym and I haven't stuck with it, so I fully admit that persisting, if I truly want to be the change I want to see in myself, I actually need to persist at it, right? Influencing without authority. It's important that we are able to be credible, authentic agents of change, demonstrate that, this change is important and it means you, and help people understand why they should want to be a part of it. If we can't influence others to get on board, we're not going to get people on board. I realize that's kind of self-explanatory, but the challenge with that is your organization has invested money, right? People, time, resources in actually making this change happen. And there are usually, at least every organization I've worked at, since I tend to work at companies that have shareholders, right? So there has to be a benefit tied to those dollars. They're expecting a certain business outcome, which is why they're willing to spend money on people like me and the other members of the change team. They're expecting a return on their investment. If we can't persuade anybody to get on board, the fact is we've just wasted a lot of money. And we're not going to be reaping those benefits that are the reason why we finally got people to fund us, right? It's very important that we get people on board. One of the ways I influence without authority, I learned this early on from my stepfather. And he argues that these are the 8 most powerful words in the English language. You don't have to agree with us, I'm still going to share them. I have a problem. By saying I have a problem, I'm not saying you have a problem. I'm also not saying you are the problem. What I'm saying is I have a problem. I've been tasked with something. It's a problem. And I need your help. You are a person of influence. You are a person with expertise. You are a person with the knowledge, with the network, with the know-how to actually get something done in this organization. I'm approaching you because I've been tasked with this really daunting thing. I want people to change. I can't do it by myself. Will you please lend me your expertise? Will you please chime in? Will you please suspend disbelief? Whatever help it is that I need from you, I need your help. Again, my stepfather argues that the reason this is so powerful is because often when we're approaching people, especially with a new project, they're like, someone's demanding so much more time from me, and I don't have enough time in the day, and I already have a horrible work-life balance, and oh my goodness, they're asking for more of me, right? By approaching them with I have a problem, first of all, they can't argue with that. It's an I statement. In my perspective, I do have a problem. And with all humility, I'm approaching you and I'm asking you to please help me in whatever way you can. So now it's your turn. How do you influence without authority? How will you influence without authority? How will you get those people who are impacted by your change on board? Welcome back. Thank you. We're on to the last one. You've made it. You've done such a great job on a Thursday afternoon when it's so hot outside. Our seventh change agent skill is focusing on the goal. The reason that we're leading change is not because we want fame and glory. Fame and glory would be lovely. Recognition is always good. It always feels good. But that's not why we have been tasked with leading this change. The real goal of change is for people to be comfortable and understand that we're asking them to make this change, and they feel comfortable enough about and they understand the value of actually making that change and sticking to it so that it becomes how we do business. The reason that focusing on the goal is so important is because if we're really in it for ourselves, if we're really all about the glory, that leads to isolation and distrust. Have any of you ever worked for a manager who you could tell was 100% in it just for themselves? Did that make you motivated to come to work every day? Did you want to show up and do your best and be like, yeah, I totally want Rob to get that promotion and not give me anything, right? Woo! I am coming in. Yeah, no. Isolation and distrust. People can tell. People can tell when you're in it for you versus truly in it for the organization. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about resistance to change. And so I will tell you that now is when we're especially going to focus on it. Some of you may be familiar with Karen Pryor. She is a behavioral biologist. She is most famous for clicker training. For those of you who do that with your dogs or whales or dolphins or whatever. She's done clicker training. She is the pioneer of it. As a behavioral biologist, she wrote this fantastic blog several years ago that Patty and I, my co-author, absolutely love. And I want to share it with you because this really embodies not only the resistance to change, but what it is that we as change agents need to do. First response when people hear about the change, they ignore you. Doesn't mean me. I can put them on ignore. As a change agent, or in Karen Pryor's words, a change maker, what you need to do is persist. Find allies, persist. The next stage, people pretend to agree. Oh yeah, I'm totally on board with that. They do nothing. So you need, again, right? It's going to become a common theme. Persist. Find allies and persist. You're going to see a theme. The third step, when it actually starts to impact them, when they can't ignore you any longer, is they start to resist, they delay, they obstruct. oh, that's not on my priorities list. You have to go talk to my sponsor. That's not, my executive isn't on board with that. You have to go talk to somebody else. This is the time when I show my age and I refer to Sesame Street, over, under, and through, for those of you who may be of similar age to me. It's important during this phase that we keep going. We get creative. We're still finding those allies and persisting, yet we're also finding new creative ways. If these people are starting to throw up roadblocks, it's important that we find other ways around so we can make sure that we keep going. The fourth step is when people start to openly attack you. Now, this is not fun, but it's also a very important phase in resistance, because when they're starting to openly attack you, that means that change is really happening. That means that they're starting to see that their peers or other departments are actually taking the steps and actually have adopted. And so it's extremely important that you keep going. You need to be empathetic. And the biggest thing you need to do is sometimes these attacks get personal and you need to not take them personally. Don't take it personally. It's not about you. It is about the change. That's why we're focusing on the goal. Fifth step, they can't ignore you anymore. Their attacks have done nothing. Okay, they start to absorb. They start to actually read the materials. They start to get a better understanding for what the change actually means to them, their department. Reinforce it. Make sure that it does stick. Then they're going to start to utilize. So they're actually going to start doing. Woo! They've actually stepped into it. They're actually using the processes. They've taken the training. They're actually starting to demonstrate and make it a part of how they do business. Keep going. Step 7 is where I take a deep breath and I call Patty and I say, and now they're claiming credit. And she says, focus on the goal. The goal was not personal glory. Yep, we all know that it wasn't their idea, but if they want to take credit, let them. Because you know what? If you let them take credit, they're on board. That is why it's so important to focus on the goal. We wanted them to change. Oh my goodness, we got there. They want to take credit, it was their idea, fine. Let them. And finally, oh my goodness, they are now standing on soapboxes. They're going to departmental meetings. They are championing and advertising to everybody how awesome this change is. Woohoo! What's the next change you're going to work on? Can you get them in as change agents early? Because all of a sudden they're on board. They're no longer attacking you. They are now so on board, they've claimed credit anyway. So as long as they're claiming credit and they're on this super duper high, embrace them. And see if you can use them for the next thing that you need to do. I love this list. Okay, now it is your turn. How are you going to focus on the goal? How are you going to find your equivalent of Patty to remind you to take a deep breath and go, oh, it's fine, let them. I'll give you a couple minutes. All right, now that you have your strategies, I just want to do a quick recap. We have talked today about the 7 skills that successful change agents possess, and hopefully you've had a chance through networking and thinking about it to come up with your own personal strategies, especially if there are 1 or 2 of these that maybe you haven't actively done before. I hope that you found today worthwhile. Our first skill was envisioning what is possible. Think of Apple, think different, right? We want to envision what's possible because we don't want to limit ourselves to those things that are just not working today. Our second skill was asking powerful questions. By asking powerful questions, we can get beyond the tip of the iceberg. Especially for those of us as consultants, we can get down to the true root cause, so we can make sure that our solution addresses the root cause and not just the symptoms. We learn to listen actively. We restate and we make sure that we're demonstrating to our audience that we truly hear them. And the reason that that's so important is because if people don't feel that you understand the true impact to them, they're not going to get on board. They at least want to be heard. Welcoming others' ideas. Again, sometimes you're going to have to say no, but it's important to at least pause when you hear suggestions for how you can improve your change, how you can improve the plan, how you can improve the training. Pause and see if it might be a good idea to bring their ideas in. Because if you incorporate those ideas, you've just created another change agent. Because people feel like you're truly willing to listen to them and appreciate what change means to them. Develop trust. I don't think any of us want our changes limited to the people who can be spared from their parts of the organization. By developing trusted relationships, by truly getting to know those people who really deliver to your customers every day, they're able to help you identify roadblocks and obstacles and make sure that what you're designing and building is truly going to support their needs. Influence without authority. If we don't get people up on board and doing change, we're not going to achieve the benefits. We're not going to be able to convince anybody to actually do the thing that we're investing so much hard work and sweat and tears in. And finally, focus on the goal. It's not about personal recognition. It's not about glory. Really what we're trying to achieve is this change for our organization. By focusing on the goal, we can make sure that we're not isolated. People trust us. And again, I think we mentioned that we can tell, right? We can tell when somebody is just in it for themselves, and none of us really wants to work for that person. So those are the 7 skills of successful change agents. And I'm going to open it up now to any questions. Thank you for your time.